The U.S. women's national team is currently down in Mexico for the CONCACAF Championship, a tournament that has already qualified them for both the Olympics and the World Cup. Now, the U.S. women's national team needs no introduction. They have been one of the most successful women's national teams ever. But as always, with each new cycle, there's players coming and there's players going. And with the women's national team, there are some big names that may or may not be getting as much playing time as we expected moving forward. And we've got a lot of new players coming in, and head coach Vlatko is going to have to figure out how to get this machine going in the right direction. To kind of figure it all out and unpack it, I brought on Cheyenne of Between Clean Sheets. Cheyenne has the misfortune of being a DC United fan, so I know times are tough in the soccer world for you right now. But Cheyenne, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for reminding me in this moment of what I was trying to escape in this conversation.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to twist that knife a little bit. So as we kind of look at this team, they've already played 3 games, the group stage of the CONCACAF tournament. They have won all 3 games of kind of varying levels of impressiveness to this point. But I think to start, I want to talk about some of the players who are not with this team. There are a bunch of players that either through injury or other reasons are not with the group, including Sam Mewis, Abby Dahlkhiper, Lynn Williams, Crystal Dunn, Julie Ertz, Kristen Press, and Tobin Heath. Now, a lot of those players are out because of either they just had a child or they're injured, but I think Kristen Press and Tobin Heath are 2 interesting ones. Kristen Press did pick up an injury kind of late on, but Vlatko mentioned that she probably wasn't going to be with the group even if she wasn't injured, right. That their team is moving on from her. And Tobin Heath is kind of the similar situation. She doesn't have a team right now at the club level, and it seems like the national team is kind of passed her by. Is that fair to say with those 2 star players?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Tobin Heath recently joined OL Reign, which I think is like the team du jour for NWSL in terms of signings. It stinks because from an emotional standpoint, I've watched for all the years that I've been a very active adult fan of the women's national team, have watched Tobin Heath just run circles around everybody. And I've watched Kristen Press do the same, maybe with a little less flashy approach. But it seems to me, obviously, that Vlatko is trying to give a different set of players a chance to bring in younger players, maybe players who didn't travel around as much as Tobin Heath and Kristen Press did during COVID, which was completely understandable, by the way. I do feel that there was some stability needed for the team in every part of the field, and it just seemed that the places where they would fit in were already were situations or spots on the roster.
They got some tough competition. Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a minute because over in that winger position, you have some very good players. I kind of want to go through the roster and kind of go through each position group and kind of get your thoughts on each of them, starting with the goalkeeper. So Alyssa Nair is kind of the incumbent coming into this group, and Is there any reason to believe that she won't be the keeper in the Women's World Cup next summer? Our partners at BetOnline continue to be your #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports development, including this year's basketball championship finals, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE to get the bonus and get into the action. Bet online, where the game starts.
Hard to say with a year going by, but I think Casey Murphy, who I believe played the last 2 matches, started, I think would be a great person to flesh out, to kind of develop in the next year. I do think that the statement that Vlatko made yesterday about the squad and how they performed last night versus Mexico versus what they will look like when they eventually go to the World Cup will be completely different. My hope is that that's some sort of veiled statement about maybe enjoying the usefulness of the veterans from a leadership perspective and and helping some of these younger players get their play or their mentality settled and kind of built up. But I hope that if Alyssa comes in, it'll just kind of be the same way that Harris was as a backup for our last major tournament.
Yeah, and that's kind of the story of this squad right now. Is there's a lot of players that are in their mid-30s that are big names and have been a big part of this group for a long time, but are kind of approaching the end. And there's a new group of players that deserve an opportunity and deserve their chance and are very much pushing. Let's get to that in the center backs, because I think we have that right here.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout this tournament, we've seen Elena Cook and Naomi Germer, as well as Becky Sauerbrunn, who is, I mean, she has 202 caps.
Right.
I mean, she's been the mainstay at center back for this group for a very long time. But is she being pushed right now by Cook and Germer?
I think so, yes. And we'll see it happen a bit more as we approach the semifinals against Costa Rica later this week, and then hopefully the final for this CONCACAF W tournament. I guess I stick to my same theme, which is I do think that they provide something valuable in terms of leadership. And you've seen gals like Becky definitely take the center stage in terms of A, captaining the team, but B, being the spokesperson and speaking on behalf of these younger ladies. But I think that when you are in a situation where some of these girls, as great as they are, one game here and there, as promising as they are at their respective club teams, it's nice to have the persistent or the constant that is someone like Becky Sauerbrunn, for sure. And to me, it's like, if worse comes to worse, you have her, which is definitely not the way she's ever been looked at as a player. She's always like the greatest option. But it's one of those situations where if you do have a younger player who's kind of out of their wheelhouse and trying to get themselves situated, if they are not having an easy time doing that, then in Becky comes is what I'm hoping happens for next year.
Now, Abby Dahlkhiper's been out of this group with a rib injury. She's been right next to Sauerbrunn for a long time now. I mean, those two have been the backbone of the U.S. men's national team defense for years. Where does she fit into this mix when she's healthy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. If I'm remembering correctly, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong. We exist with a 4-back almost, well, in the past few games that I've definitely watched, almost always. So I think that there's been a shift, as I've noticed in some of these matches, when we're looking for to play some of these more difficult teams, as I've watched some of these other women's teams absolutely crush the past few months. It'll be up to someone like Abby, who is definitely younger and playing with a really phenomenal NWSL team, to step up in that. I would say also leadership capacity, but I don't see, if she's healthy, I don't see her not making the squad. If I had to guess.
It's gonna be an interesting year at the center back position, because Garmer's had some really nice games, as has Cook. Now, moving on to the fullbacks, of course, the fullbacks, you're going to be without Crystal Dunn, who's out of this roster with an injury. I'm assuming that she's going to be one of the starters in this group. My question is, who's going to be the other starter over at right back? Kelly O'Hara has been the incumbent for a long time. I mean, she has some of the most caps. She's one of the most capped players on the women's national team. We've seen a lot of Emily Fox, as well as Sofia Huerta, who's actually, she was a dual international and played a little bit with the Mexican squad. So that's an interesting little dual international connection there.
Right.
But I'm seeing a lot of people on social media right now questioning whether or not Sofia Huerta deserves that spot over Kelly O'Hara at the moment. What are your thoughts on that positional battle?
Yeah, at the moment, I don't think so, but I do see a space for where she could prove herself, and it's very clear to me that Blacko's trying a lot of different things right now, and that so much of this great kind of transition, all these transitional movements that the women's national team plays, and how quick they play, oftentimes that defensive position is going to have an element of the offense to it, and Kelly O'Hara has done that masterfully. So I feel like what I saw lacking last night in the midfield. If we can find a situation where Huerta can prove herself in that turnover, I think that she'll get an opportunity to really show what she's got in a more comprehensive way. But I do think, obviously, Kelly just has a lot more on her and has played with some of these folks in games like we've seen in the past couple of weeks that have kind of shown us what we're used to and what we know we definitely can do. Kelly's always shown up for that.
Yeah, it needs to be said that she is kind of returning from an injury right now, so
Right.
apparently Vlatko's not looking to kind of limit her minutes a little bit. So there is that caveat kind of hanging over everything. But I've been impressed from what I've seen from Huerta. At the same time, Kelly O'Hara gives you this player who's going to kind of cut in as a fullback. And she had one of the nicest balls of the game last night with her little chipped over the top ball that was that ruled offside or so. I don't remember exactly how that played out. I just remember seeing the ball like, oh my God, that was
like, I don't care where it goes. It's beautiful.
Who hit that? Anyway, so we're moving on to the midfield. You kind of just alluded to probably the most criticized group of this tournament so far. The U.S. is kind of not playing the prettiest soccer at the moment and kind of failing to break down teams whenever they're sitting back defensively. Of this midfield group, we have, let's see, Lindsey Horan, Rose Lavelle, Christy Mewis, Ashley Sanchez, Andy Sullivan. Who's kind of stood out to you and maybe who's not so much stood out to you of this group so far?
Well, we'll keep with the conversation about veteran versus new. I do think that there's an interesting dynamic between Lindsey Horan and Ashley Sanchez, who, by the way, I have the pleasure of watching Ashley Sanchez here at home in Washington, D.C. She plays for Washington Spirit. She's one of, 7 players from that club who have made it onto the national team roster, which is incredible. She plays as if she is so much older than she is. And she has a great command of the ball and also a great command of the space. I would say the same about Lindsey Horan, but it just seems like she really tuckered herself out by the time this tournament was over. And I'm not entirely sure if it's just climate or if it's kind of picking up for the slack that she perceives, or doing a lot of that bridging the gap, so to speak, in the midfield that we did definitely notice. But I do think that she provides a lot in the middle that I don't necessarily think is something that she'll be fighting for by any means. But I think that there are different personalities and styles of play on the midfield with Rose, with Ashley, with Lindsey. And it's hard for me to envision the perfect combination right now, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Julia Ertz is out of this group right now. She recently had a child. She's only 30 years old. I say only because in this group, that's kind of the median age.
Right.
Is she still expected to be that lockdown defensive midfielder and provide that physicality to this group? Is that a missing piece right now?
I do think it's a missing piece for sure. Do I think it's going to be her? That's really tough to say. On my list of women who have had so far incredible careers, but have also done an incredible thing, which is creating life. It's wild. I can't even envision doing that for them too, because there's just so much about your body that you have had control over for so long, and then trying to get yourself back into that space has been difficult. And Alex Morgan has talked about that a lot. But I do see Crystal Dunn definitely coming back. Julie Ertz, I'm not so sure. I would hope so, but I'm inclined to think that there could be hopefully someone to fill that role. It's hard to say. I'm not so technically savvy that I'm going to speculate right now, but I do hope that she returns in some capacity, because it definitely is not fitting of her career to end it right now, or to kind of see the bench sooner than I think she deserves, just because she took a step aside for her family.
Well, she does. She is one of the bigger stars on this team, and she does have a lot of
Right.
opportunities outside of soccer, which is something. And one of the things hanging over this group is that women's soccer don't players don't get paid as much as the men's players do, and maybe she does have more opportunity to earn money outside of soccer. So I mean, that is something that is kind of there, and it is worth mentioning. I think one of the players that I've been kind of just confused on throughout this tournament is Rose Lavelle, because coming into this, I expected her to be just the lock picker, just the player that makes this team tick. I mean, we've seen her do some unbelievable things on the field for the women's national team in the past. I don't know that I've gotten that from her so far. I mean,
No.
she's been nice in moments, but she hasn't exactly been the straw that stirs the drink, or the engine that's making this team go. What have you thought about her performances so far in the midfield?
I would agree, but you'll have to remind me how many minutes she got off the top
Well,
of my
there's been a
head.
lot of rotation. I don't know
Right.
exactly which game she started and which one she didn't. I don't think, off the top of my head, I think she started the first game, didn't start the second game, and started the third game. I think.
Right. So that's, to me, I think it's tough for someone like her who's very analytical and does a really good job of piecing the movement of the ball together, bringing the transition, like I mentioned before, from the back to the front quite well. But she does so much on her own too that the balance that she strikes between those things, I think, takes a second. And we're so used to seeing the women's national team score goals in the first minute or begin dominating right away. And I don't, by the way, think that we're going to see that always. We always seem to be stunned when it doesn't happen that way, which I think is funny. But it seems like she hasn't had enough of a chance to get settled. And I would even say, watching her in the NWSL, I've been a little bit surprised that she's not as dynamic of a presence with her team at times. I don't think that that's any um, thing to be concerned about. I definitely think that she deserves her spot on the team, but I do think that her product is highly affected by this huge shift around. She's young,
You're
but
kind
she
of
still kind of comes
Yeah.
from the old space, so to speak.
You're kind of alluding to one of the big criticisms that we're hearing from fans right now, regarding Vlatko, the head coach of the national team, and that is the amount of rotation they're doing, and the just boring soccer that they're playing. And like you said, we're used to seeing just really flashy stuff, just a very dominant U.S. women's national team. Players like Rapinoe and Tobin Heath taking players on in the wings, and then these big physical goals from Alex Morgan, and just lighting it up, and these really nice deep line playmaker type balls out of the back from like a Julia Ertz, or somebody like that. We're not
Right.
seeing that so much with this group. It's been pretty. We're better than you, so eventually we're gonna beat you, and maybe we'll win some one-on-one battles on the wings, and put
Yeah.
one in. Maybe Mewis is gonna, like, almost like taking a ball from a quarterback, just run directly into a ball and go into the goal. It's been kind of boring. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on this right now. Let's say you're putting on your Vlatko cap right now. Somebody comes to you and says, "All right, Cheyenne, we want you to run the show for the rest of this CONCACAF tournament." What do you think the value lies for this team right now? Is it in rotation and giving some of these other players opportunities to show what they can do and potentially earn a spot against some of these veterans who maybe are in the squad right now or recovering from injury? Or should you be, identifying your group, playing that group over and over again, trying to build that chemistry and trying to build towards what we're going to see in the World Cup? What would you do?
Interesting question. First, separate of formation or squad, I would definitely delete my Twitter. I would not want to hear anyone's opinion on how I was coaching. It's tough because I think COVID definitely forced this for the men's national team. I loved seeing the domestic squad and the foreign squad, and it gave us an opportunity to see something steady, but still at the same time something different. And the problem that I've seen the women's national team have, there's this element of, and I say this with absolutely no disrespect, but there's this like Harlem Globetrotter element to the team where when you've got these great standouts, Carly Lloyd, Alex Morgan, Megan Rapinoe, etc., you kind of take them all around the country to show everyone just how great they are. And sometimes it goes a little bit longer than it should. And has been a period of time where some of these newer players really should have gotten a little bit more playing time before this tournament than they did. And it's at the same time, I'm like, it's hard for them to really get that practice when we're playing teams that don't provide the competition, that we're beating 8-9-0, which is also, by the way, just as hard to watch, in my humble opinion. I think that if I'm thinking of fielding a team that does have that leadership and veteran aspect, but that still allows these younger women to play, I think what I would look for is, and this comes from the bias of me being a Washington Spirit fan, I mean, Ashley Sanchez and Trinity Rodman connect so well, and Ashley Hatch as well, who unfortunately had to leave because of an injury this week, but they all connect very, very well. Why wouldn't you try that and maybe build off of that and then provide the veteran support of a Becky Sauerbrunn and give younger ladies a chance on the wing? Why wouldn't you like bolster the core center of the field and then try something new in small increments, so to speak? It's hard. I feel like they get so few minutes together, but they also, almost all of them, play in the same league. And then I'm thinking, even from, I apologize for rambling, but I'm thinking even of Megan Rapinoe. There were so many people that were kind of annoyed that she was there, because then she ended up leaving to receive this honor. And a couple people were like, well, why would you be upset about that? And the response was, well, we're upset that it takes a roster spot away from some of these gals we know for sure will probably be there next year. And I wouldn't be certain to say that about Megan Rapinoe, but if I'm not mistaken, she and Vlatko have worked together, I believe, on OL Reign. So there's like that element of the soft spot and understanding that what you may not have on the field, you have off the field. It's just a weird, delicate balance. I don't think I would do nearly as much en masse rotation as I feel like I've seen, especially from game to game. Because you do want to win. Obviously, we qualified for the Olympics and World Cup, but you don't want to put any of that in jeopardy right now. Maybe we can play around with the formation in a few other ways that don't seem nearly as drastic or chaotic.
Well, you mentioned Megan Rapinoe, so let's get to the wingers for this national team, which I think have been the bright spot of all the players, of all the positional groups so far. We got Mallory Pugh, we got Midge Pierce, we got Megan Rapinoe, and Sophia Smith. Let's start with Megan Rapinoe, since you were just talking about her. I think she's 36 years old at this point. I think that's correct.
Aging so beautifully.
I mean, it's incredible that she can still go out there and do it and be, I mean, she was just such a dominant player in her prime. You still see in the role that she's playing right now, which is kind of a substitute, kind of late in games, she still has an ability on the ball, and she can still see the field, and she can still kind of put that ball wherever she wants to whenever she's delivering crosses. It seems like she still has something to offer to this national team, even if it's just as a late game substitute role. Is that fair? Do you think that she's going to continue within this group in that role? I mean, we saw in the stadium, anytime that her number comes up on the sideline, she's getting the biggest eruption from the fans in attendance of anybody in that stadium. She is a massive star on this team, not just a soccer star, but just a pop culture star, and she means a lot to a lot of people. Where does she, based on her play, does that role that she's playing as kind of the super sub late in game, is she valued there, or is she a face that a lot of people know? Like, is this a marketing thing? Like, where do you feel? How do you feel about her spot on the team?
I have enough respect for the coaching staff to believe that it's definitely more than a marketing strategy. I do think that when the body goes, the brain is still there. And to go back to DC United, I mean, Wayne Rooney was not the most, he was definitely not the most in shape guy on the team when he played for DC United, but there were obviously skills and just a tactical ability that he had, and it was never going to go away. And it made for a steady tempo at times, a perfectly executed cross, a change of pace, the ability, like tempo is obviously probably the best way to describe it. I think
whenever he was announced, whenever the rumors came up about him in the airport in DC, people started replaying that clip that he had,
oh my gosh,
where
yes.
off of that corner kick, he ran back, slid tackled a player, then put in like one of the most phenomenal balls anybody's ever seen for a header late in a game. I mean, one of the most unbelievable clips in MLS history. And that was, I mean, 59-year-old Wayne Rooney running back and just putting in the effort. Incredible. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, I think about Megan Rapinoe that way, because that granted, he played the whole match, which was insane, but that was a very late stoppage time goal, and you can count on Megan Rapinoe for something like that, especially if she comes in the second half. And that is something that I noticed. You mentioned Midge Purse. I don't think she's fantastic, by the way, very excited about what she has to offer, but there were so many times, even yesterday, where I saw run, don't quite take it to goal, try to pass it off, try to do something that us as the viewer goes, wait, what you were this close, why did you stop there, or why was there no one there to support you, this, that, and the other. I think Megan Rapinoe will always be able to find that, to create that, or to orchestrate that. But I see experiences like Ali Krieger kind of existing on the bench for, it was what, I can't remember, the Olympics, the World Cup. Everything blends together, by the way. My memory for these things is just gone.
Absolutely, yeah. For me, it's gotten a lot better since I've been doing this, because I basically have to do like a book report on every game, so it's a lot easier to kind of go back in the memory bank and go, that happened this game, that happened this game. But prior to doing this, like, everything is blended together. It's so difficult to remember. Was that the 2010 World Cup, or was that? Was it which game was it? Oh no, I don't remember. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, and I should say, for those of y'all who have made it this far, my ability to describe all of this is not nearly the level that I'm sure it definitely is for Sam, but for others who talk tactically about these teams. For me, I have a difficult time really wrapping my mind around the women's national team if I am not watching them, because I don't think we're yet in a place where they're getting the coverage they deserve. And the most prime example is in looking over the game that we played against Haiti. What was that, last week, 2 weeks ago? There was no formation available to me online, and FotMob, the app I normally go to, didn't even have their lineup, which is wild to me. And it's tough, because then I'm scrolling Twitter and seeing my least favorite thing on the planet, these contextless live tweets that just are like shouting into the internet about a game. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Who are you talking about?
I'm laughing because I do that a lot. If you follow my Twitter account on like a Saturday or Sunday, I mean, there might be you got to pass it right there tweet that's just not connected to anything.
Yes. And for me, who watches MLS, as many MLS games as I can, very hard to tell who's talking about what. B, for the women's national team, if I'm missing games, I mean, heck, I hope that someone does the homework like you do all the time and provides me with some info. Joe Lowry from Total Soccer Show had a great episode come out. One of the things that I caught from the episode that I did not catch after the game, because I'm in Eastern Standard Time and ended very late and I had a job to get to this morning, but he mentioned that Becky Sauerbrunn had kind of talked about the adversity that exists for the team right now, and he called it manufactured adversity. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of true, because we're not really struggling from anything. We beat a team last week 5-0, and when we go out and play these friendlies, we're absolutely crushing teams. But I mean, think about this, and this is to drive the point home about this interesting old and new dynamic, and how we're still trying to figure out what it will look like on the field. She, as captain, whenever she is captain, is speaking on behalf of the team. And so it's one of those situations where if you're hearing it from Becky, you're like, that's not real. You don't have there's not any adversity. You just had a bad game, because how many caps does she have? 100 plus. If you think about her speaking for all of these 25 and younger gals who are literally in their first major tournaments, who are getting some of their first starts, who have just seen the national team for the first time this year, there is adversity, because you're stepping onto a team that has been so dominant and has such a reputation. And when you go to these matches and you have Megan Rapinoe being cheered by people as if she was Messi, and then you play a game like you did last night, it's okay. It's kind of confusing. It's a lot of tension created for these gals who are stepping onto the biggest stage of their entire lives. And I feel for that. So I definitely understood what Sauerbrunn was saying from that perspective. But when I was listening to it as if it was her adversity, I was like, that's not real. You're not really struggling. You just had a really bad game.
Well, one player who's not struggling right now is Sophia Smith. I mean, for my money, she's been, I don't know. I'm kind of debating between two players as who's been the best player that I've seen. But she's certainly been the best winger that I've seen. And I know coming into the tournament, there was a lot of hype that she could potentially be the best player heading into this Women's World Cup for the U.S. Women's National Team. Sorry.
That's okay. It rolls off the tongue so easily. You can't help it sometimes.
You don't know how many times I've had to say that acronym in the past year. Anyway, how have you felt about Sophia's performance so far throughout this group stage?
I'm very excited. Very excited. You can tell she's tried things. You can tell that she's been confident, and you can tell that she's having fun. I think that it was funny to me. I was like, I really like this girl. And I was like, wait, she plays in the NWSL. I could literally watch her anytime. Which is always a good reminder. Men's national team, women's national team, club careers in America, definitely worth watching. But I don't I don't have any critiques for her. I would say her and Purse, definitely. Rodman, also Sanchez, for whatever mistakes they made. To me, it's like, you got this. You're still trying. You're figuring out where you exist, and you're doing what you know how to do, to the point where even if there is kind of a more boring product on the field, you as an individual are absolutely crushing it. So I'm excited for her.
Yeah, I think going back to kind of some of the things you alluded to earlier is like there's this brand that you come to expect from the U.S. Women's National Team, and it's that we're going to be better than you in every way. Whatever way that you want to play this game, we're going to be better than you. We're going to out physical you if you want to be physical. We're going to out pretty you if you want to play pretty soccer. Like whatever it is you want to do, we're going to be better than you in that. And I don't see so much of that swagger from this group that I've seen from previous groups.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever you look at, I mean, the Rapinoe or like Wambach or Carly Lloyd or Tobin Heath, I mean, some of these players just had this look in their eyes as if to say, like, whatever you want to do, we're going to be better than you at however you want to play. We're going to beat you in every single way. And so Sophia Smith is one of the few players that I think kind of like fits into that category for me. I think no matter who was in front of her, I mean, she's confident that she's going to beat that player. I mean, that first goal that she scored in the tournament against Haiti, where it was like off the side of her foot, and it was like a flicked back. I don't even know how to describe what in the world that was, but just the amount of confidence that she had to take that on was just incredible. Now, the only other player who I think possesses that so far, maybe a little bit Kelly O'Hara. She's always got that. But I mean, Alex Morgan has been absolutely tremendous, I think, every time that she stepped on the field. She looked like a dominant player. She looked like she was playing on a different level than everybody else. She hasn't got as much opportunity. She hasn't got a ton of service. I felt like her hold-up game, every time the ball came to her, I mean, physically, she's still dominant, and technically, she can get out of troublesome situations. It feels like the U.S. is in good hands with her up top. How have you felt about the forward situation with Alex Morgan and Trinity Rodman and Ashley Hatch?
So again, the bias is showing. Love Ashley, love Trinity. They are very young. Trinity definitely. So I'm pretty sure she's the youngest on the squad. I
believe she's 20 years old.
Yes. I feel so old. She's great. I really, she also may not have showed at this tournament, and I think she's definitely, she will be as confident as Sofia. I think she will also embody that confidence that you speak of in very little time. I think in this situation, the forward situation, the presence of a veteran like Alex Morgan, who still has more years in her than Megan Rapinoe or than Becky Sauerbrunn, is very valuable because she has grown to expect a certain level of play, certain style of play, or a relationship on the field with her based on what she provides. I wouldn't necessarily say she's the most flexible player. I think that comes with the territory of being a forward. Her style, I tried to think about it or wrap my mind around what it was in this tournament, because the way that she's played has changed a little. And I wasn't sure if that was just this stage in her career or if it was adjusting to what the team looks like right now. But I do think that there were a couple of times where it wasn't like the signature Alex Morgan style or as much finesse as I was expecting. It does seem, though, that her presence is commanding on the field in that she is definitely orchestrating the shift or orchestrating the play among everybody else, where I have always seen her in the past as a very individual player. I do think that she is definitely aware of the new faces around her and trying to accommodate that in her play. I guess that's how I would describe it, if that makes any sense. If you go back and look at the matches with that lens, I think it'll make sense, because the personality that she's had in the past of just throwing her whole body into a thing or adding a little drama to it, a ton of finesse, that to me doesn't exist in such an acute or noticeable way as it used to. And that's not a bad thing at all. It just, you can definitely tell that she's adjusted. So
yeah, it seems like when she first hit the scene, she was kind of darting all around.
Yes,
she was kind of the speed to Wambach's power. And at this point in the tournament, she looks like she's a little bit more Wambach-y than maybe that early Alex Morgan that we kind of saw.
Did you ever think it would take me a good 5 minutes for you to explain something that you could in like 30 seconds.
You just got to use the word wombacky. I mean, once you
Wombacky.
master
Hold
turning
on,
a
let me
player's
write
name
that down.
into a verb, then you can go pretty far with that. So
Right,
we've kind of gone
right.
through the lineup. We've got a few more games to go in the back half of this tournament. I can recall last summer in the Gold Cup, there was a lot of frustrations with how the U.S. men's national team was playing with a lot of rotation. And then once they got to the knockout games, we really began to see kind of the group form, and they played a little bit better through those knockout games. I'm expecting to see something similar. I think a lot of times, anytime there's a tournament, we just saw it with the US U20 men's team. The team tends to be playing better at the end of the tournament than they do at the beginning of the tournament.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating them tightening up the screws a little bit. I do want to do a little bit of bonus show, a little bit of extras, because Wayne Rooney's coming back to DC United. I mean, the word on the street was that his wife didn't like DC. She didn't like America. She wanted to get out of there. Wayne Rooney was coaching in the championship. All of a sudden, I mean, he's in DC. From what I understand, he's not going to be the head coach right away because they've got some administrative issues that they got to figure out. But I mean, you're talking about a DC team that, early MLS 1.0, they were the dominant force of the league. They've sort of taken a back seat for a few years. They eventually got their stadium built, which was supposed to be a big boon for the team. I don't know. In this day and age where homegrowns is a big deal in MLS, I mean, a few years ago, DC was putting out Kevin Paredes, and Griffin Yao was an exciting prospect, and Moses Nyman.
Yeah.
Moses Nyman kind of took a backseat. Kevin Paredes went to Germany. Griffin Yao just got transferred out to, I don't remember where, Belgium or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what's going on with the squad? And is Wayne Rooney going to be the one who's going to be able to fix it?
So I first want to thank you for the opportunity to go on record and say this very unpopular opinion, which is I think hiring Wayne Rooney is like putting lipstick on a pig. I just
try to get out of the way for the screenshot. So.
Oh yeah, you're like, I will not sit next to this awful take. I really feel that way. It's, man, I just don't. First of all, we did a great job in our sale of Kevin Paredes, I think, to Wolfsburg. And I find that particularly astonishing given how few minutes he actually played. I mean, Philadelphia gives a lot of their guys away what feels like really quickly, and yet they're getting at least 2.5 times the minutes that Paredes got. And I felt like last year was I always joke that to watch DC United and to show up as a season ticket holder is doing them a favor. Because sometimes it's really freaking hard to watch them. And last year it was the first year that I've been a season ticket holder, which, by the way, I've been one for 6 years now. That was the first year that I've actually really enjoyed watching the team. And that includes times where we've lost late, or we also lost 6-0 to NYCFC toward the end of the season last year. And that obviously was a bummer, but I wasn't nearly as pissed off about it as I was about our 7-0 loss to Philadelphia last week. So right now, I'm about 40 minutes away from throwing my shoes back on and going down to the wharf in DC to do an event, a fan event, that no sales rep in the front office can neither confirm or deny will have the presence of Wayne Rooney. And it's just so wild to me, on the heels of that awful loss of several really embarrassing losses, of an ACL tear for Brad Smith, a wingback of ours that came from Seattle, a phenomenal team, and several injuries. I mean, Moses, to your point, he's been out for several months now. Bill Hamid,
Forever.
Bill Hamid, one of our great homegrowns, just had hand surgery. And I couldn't really tell you, besides Julian Gressel, a player on our team that I'm really excited about, save for Taxi Fantas. I'll definitely give that guy a shout out. A Greek forward of ours who they announced made the All-Star team today. He's had more goals in his first 10 games than I believe just about anyone in the league, if not tied for first. But it's just so wild to me for that to be a thing given our current situation. And to add Wayne Rooney into the mix, by the way, you mentioned isn't coaching right away. First of all, visa issues, one. Two, it's my understanding that his wife and family are not traveling with him. Pause for reflection and speculation. I do also think that DC is still so small potatoes in MLS in a way, that the kind of people tasked with writing journalistic bodies of work about this Wayne Rooney situation are fully intending on, if they haven't already, asking him about his freaking wife and family, which is so mind-boggling to me. I'm like, I don't leave it be, just leave it. Like we're already in a weird enough situation, and we're making such a big deal out of it. I mean, this event was announced 48 hours ago. Why? Let
me ask you this. There's a lot of teams around the league that are really cooking right now, not just with their performance on the field, but also with their attendance, with the way that the team has like embedded themselves in their local communities and just become an important thing for their communities. And I would put Atlanta United in that group. Even though they're not playing very well right now, I feel like they are important to Atlanta at this point. Austin is another one. Seattle, Portland, both LA squads just feel really important to their communities.
Huge.
Yeah, and on the other hand, there are some franchises that not so much, and it feels like a lot of those are some of the ones that were MLS 1.0 franchises, early franchises that sort of somewhere along the way lost some steam and just have failed to kind of reconnect. And, Chicago Fire is probably the obvious example of that. Houston, up until recently, up until they acquired Hector Herrera, is probably an example of that. But DC United kind of feels that way as well to an extent. How do you get that back? If you're one of those early franchises, how do you connect with the community and kind of replicate what's going on in Austin or Atlanta or Nashville with your team that's already been around for a decade?
This is an existential question I've had as a content creator that talks a lot about DC United, and places like Austin, Kansas City, Columbus, Cincinnati, all of those places have this element where the people who live there are so proud to be from there. Atlanta is the same way. I mean, people love repping something that is Atlanta specific. So in a city like DC, where it's a double-edged sword, it's a transient city. It's a city full of soccer fans, by the way. As we lost our city's bid to be a host city for the World Cup in 2026.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I felt like that was a little bit too far, but
no, I'm happy to bring it up because I don't think that we deserved it. B,
you got the All-Star game.
As a consolation prize.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, I'm like, that's probably all we could have handled anyway. But yeah, so you've got these like folks coming in and out year after year, election cycle after election cycle, and then you've got these locals, and there feels like a huge separation between the two. Soccer, to me, would be a great way to bring both of those things together, but also the freshness and newness of these newer teams, and kind of the way that they're able to present themselves as something with no like battered past, which for the past 10 years we've not been great at all. I think that when new people come in, it's an opportunity for us to introduce ourselves as a fresh new product. And what stinks about the team is I don't see us in the city. I have a DC United sticker on my car. I wear jerseys all the time. I talk to people all the time about the team, and the stadium itself is situated in a place called Buzzard Point, right on the Potomac River, and literally a block and a half north of it is Nationals Park, and then that entire neighborhood is called Navy Yard. And the amount of people I know that live in Navy Yard that have really no grasp of what DC United or Audi Field is. I mean, some people are just dumb. We'll give them that. But that's kind of astonishing to me. It just doesn't feel like there's any engagement with the community. And hopefully it goes well, but I have presented myself to them as a resource in that capacity, being an almost 10-year resident of this city, in hopes that we utilize more of both of those sides, both the local been here forever, maybe took a break from the team for a while, and also the new folks who are either into soccer and then excited to get into local soccer, or they're just down for a good time, which can be had, I think can be had at Audi Field.
It's an interesting question for MLS to figure out moving forward, because there's a couple of stale teams at the moment, and it's a shame that it's happened in DC, because it's just such a historic and important team for Major League Soccer, and they've got a nice shiny new stadium. It seems like they have all the ingredients for a great MLS city, but it just hasn't worked out in the last few years or so. And to your point, I've been to Austin recently, and you see Austin FC stickers everywhere. Yes. People are wearing the jersey, people are wearing the shirts. I mean, everywhere you see that logo. Now, Austin is a city that doesn't have other sports teams outside of the University of Texas, so that is something nice for them. But anyway, they seem to have been an MLS success story, and how do you turn a franchise that maybe wasn't into one is an important question. We've talked about Kansas City. I mean, they were the Wizards. They became Sporting Kansas City, and it seemed to turn things a lot around for them in a big way, though we've seen other teams attempt to rebrand and it not go so well. Shout out Chicago Fire.
Chicago Fire. And Montreal anyway, going through the rebrand as well.
Club de Foot, so. Montreal. Anyway, Cheyenne, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you catching me up on the U.S. Women's National Team. Can you let everybody know where they can find your content?
Yes, of course. I am on pretty much every social media platform: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at BTWN Clean Sheets. And I have got more and more vlogs. My travel vlogs are my favorite form of content on YouTube. Just look me up between Clean Sheets.
Yeah, Cheyenne has some really cool stadium tour videos, which not a lot of people, there's not really any other out there. So it's so cool whenever you see these new incredible stadiums get built in MLS to kind of walk through with you and see what's actually going on. So I do appreciate your content in that regard. Cheyenne, thank you so much for coming on the show. Guys, thank you for watching. If you're still with us, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. If you just watched all that and you're not subscribed, what's going on in your life? You need to reevaluate some things. Anyway. Yeah. So on behalf of Cheyenne, my name is Sam. This is the Yank Report, brought to you by Bet Online.